Chapter 10 Introduction to Part 2 An Introduction to Love. The rest of this book will cover all the strategies and tactics and steps to overcoming fear. There are many forms, programs, and systems, and they all go by different names. Christianity calls it repentance, salvation, conversion, or being born again. Eastern religions have enlightenment, nirvana, or satori. Rather than reinvent the wheel, convert you to a religion you don't belong to, or try to explain cultural backgrounds to get the point across, I am going to use the most basic and simple versions of these ideas that just about anyone can grasp. The process of overcoming fear and addiction and achieving long-lasting inner peace, progress, and knowledge is very well captured in the 12-step programs. These programs are not meant to be a one-time cycle. They are the principles for achieving self-mastery and the ability to free our mind to learn and grow and heal so that we can work towards whatever we want to work for. Use them over and over and over again as often as you can, or as is needed to achieve health and long-term happiness. Following an actual 12-step program isn't the only way to succeed, and just because a program is framed around the 12 steps doesn't mean it will work for you. The next large section of this book will talk about various programs and methods that people have used to achieve success at self-mastery. It all depends on how well these principles are applied by those teaching it and those using it. I know too many who were disappointed by the condemnations or judgmental members of a group. Maybe it was the hypocrisy of the facilitator or other attendees of an AA meeting. Maybe they didn't fit in with the culture of their religious organization, or church, or community group, or whatever. That is going to be a fact of life. We are all just as hypocritical, judgmental, and condemning of others in our own unique way as those we point our fingers to. The faster we all accept that and move on, the quicker we can heal. Self-righteousness breeds self-righteousness, and is based on fear. Fear of judgment, fear of failure, and fear of stagnation. Don't be angry at others for their imperfection. Just accept that everyone is imperfect and that you need to work on your own while they work on theirs. Whether we make it where we want to go will depend on what life gives us, what our backgrounds are, what our physical, emotional, and mental limitations are, and what we choose. The end goal isn't necessarily perfection, but if we aim for perfection, we can only get better and will bring others along the way. Carl Schurz, an American ambassador to Spain in the 1800s, said it well. Ideals are like stars. You will not succeed in touching them with your hands, but like the seafaring man on the desert of waters, you choose them as your guides, and following them, you reach your destiny. More modernly, Wayne Gretzky is often quoted as saying, "You miss 100% of the shots you don't take." Keep reading and keep trying. Part 2. How to make change happen. How to love people, including yourself. The remaining chapters will focus less on the sciencey kinds of things, and more on what to do about your life. Strategies for controlling your body, mind, and spirit. Chapter 11. You're just not good enough. I've got a friend, Steve, that's not his real name, who has had a rough time. He and his young wife were having a lot of troubles. They were both very career-oriented. He worked towards prestigious professional degrees, and she was very entrepreneurial. He worked full-time and took classes on the side. She kept bouncing from one career or certification or business lead to the next. Seafood importing, fitness instruction, retail. They were from different countries and had very different ideas of what they wanted out of life. She wanted fancy cars and outward prestige. He wanted a down-to-earth lifestyle and to raise children. For several years, they did their best to work with their differences. There was love between them. They did have many things in common, and I watched them both try to amplify and focus on their similarities and shared likes. And I know he worked hard to respect what made her unique. I imagine she tried to do the same to the best of her ability. A major source of conflict and hurt between them was that she no longer wanted to have children like she did when they were first married, while he couldn't wait to be a dad. We became friends when they moved into our neighborhood and realized we had a lot in common, like our love for Subarus. His WRX was much cooler and faster than my mid-90s legacy wagon, and we would talk while driving his up and down the mountain roads and canyons near us. His wife would leave for months at a time pursuing business ventures. Alone a lot of the time, he did his best to fill his spare time in productive ways, but would often turn to pornography and masturbation, which he knew he had become addicted to and he had a hard time avoiding. It began to impact his daily life and the demands and responsibilities he needed to fulfill for work and school, so he reached out to others for help. He began attending a 12-step support group. He got counseling. He read many, many books. He confided his struggle to his wife. Scared, insecure and hurt, she would lash out at him in angry outbursts. They would argue and fight. Their arguments would often turn into arguments about their differences in money or their different goals in life. They often became very heated. They both tried to keep level heads, but often failed. Eventually, they divorced. He cleaned up his private life and began to move on with life and moved away, though we stayed in touch as best we could. He did his best to make up for his faults. He figured out why he had behaved the way he did and made serious changes to avoid them in the future. He kept pursuing his education while working to pay for it without debt. With the sense of confidence that came from knowing he had done everything he knew how to do and had fixed the problems he previously hadn't known he was causing, he began dating again. He met a beautiful and smart woman who wanted the same goals in life that he wanted, among them a family. She had a career in the same field he was interested in. She had a similar work ethic he had. They got married, and the last I heard, she was expecting a baby and they were both incredibly excited about it. On the outside, they seemed to have a much happier marriage than his first one. Given what I know of his growth and changes, I imagine it's not just superficial, and there is true happiness in their marriage, even though it's not perfect by any means. When you've accidentally ordered, or when life has handed you, a big batch of lemons, let's all be honest, life doesn't give you lemons, it gives you lemon-flavored dog poo. You can't always do much to make lemonade out of it, but it will make for good fertilizer to grow a new you. Anyone who's dealt with an addiction, a bad habit, a compulsion, an obsession, a mania, a personality flaw, or any other imperfection of any kind that has had a negative impact on yourself or your loved ones and neighbors and community will learn that the damage has been done. You can't go back and fix it, and you can't always make it better. Sometimes you can. Either way, you can stop it where it is and make a new life for yourself, slowly, starting now. Fortunately, only a very few people have to start life over from scratch when dealing with or confronting life's problems, though those who've had to and made it through will tell you often it was the best thing that ever happened to them. It's not always about turning lemons into lemonade. It's often about learning to enjoy lemons. There's the phrase, life's not about waiting for the storms to pass, it's about learning to dance in the rain, something like that. Unless you're omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent, chances are you need some help. You are incomplete. You are lacking, deficient, flawed, weak, etc. My thesaurus has more words I can use, but I think you and your beat-up self-esteem are getting the idea. The idea that we all need help is just one basis for just about all of the world's religions. The behaviors that keep people from God, or perfections, or completeness, harmony, inner peace, etc., are called sins by many people. Basically, a sin is any imperfection or flaw in ourselves, whether due to action or inaction. There are the obvious sins, like the breaking of the 10 Commandments and various other admonitions written down in the Bible, Tanakh, or Quran. But of course, there are a billion other ways to mess up and sin. Christianity teaches that we are all sinners and all need repentance. So thinking of it in this way, we all need recovery from something. Whether it's recovery from our smartphones, social media, our Ben & Jerry's ice cream binges, the latest season of a Netflix show, whatever. We all need help overcoming all the biology I just spent the first half of this book explaining. Hindus also believe that we all need improvement, and that by working to improve ourselves through reincarnation after reincarnation, we can one day achieve nirvana. Buddhists also assume that we are all imperfect, and they will spend their lives working to achieve enlightenment and inner peace. Of course, each person's religion only works as well as their level of life experience, and the thought and effort and self-introspection they put into it. Too many members of every faith, even atheism and agnosticism, can't see their own imperfections because they are too busy looking at everyone else's, blissfully unaware of the damage that they are causing themselves. We all think to ourselves, it's not that bad, I'm not as awful as those people. Except that, yes, we are. Yep, even you, Mr. or Mrs. Self-Righteous. Can you be self-righteous if you're not spiritual or religious? Absolutely. And chances are, you already are self-righteous. We all are. We're all hypocrites at some level. There's no shortage of people who know that this world we live in is pretty messed up, and it's messed up because of us. I think we all agree that we have a lot of room for improvement as a species. Where many of us fall short is realizing that we all have room for improvement as individuals. Change is what other people need to do, right? It's what humanity needs. Me? I'm okay. I'm a good person. My flaws aren't that bad. But those other people, they are crazy. I remember having dinner with a good friend, an excellent chef and cook. We were sitting in his kitchen while he gets dinner ready to have a bunch of friends over. He's slicing up some pork chops, and the topic of hunting comes up. He's sitting there, pork chop in hand, slicing it into finer pieces, more pork chops on the counter, and he says, serious as anything, I just can't stand that. Hunting. I mean, how do you go and kill another living creature? I just don't agree with that at all. Now, I don't want to analyze everything that went into or out of that statement. I didn't say a thing, I just held in my surprise and let it go, and stayed and enjoyed some delicious pork chops with some really good company. My point is, when we are removed from a situation or task or environment, it's really, really, really easy to make condemnations and judgments on other people. Super easy. So, let's hold off on our judgments and just take the assumption that most of us are pretty decent most of the time, and many of us would do the same or similar things if we were the same person from the same background and the same upbringing in the same circumstances. So, given that we all have a lot of improving to do, how do we do it? Where do we start? And will we ever get better? I'm glad you asked. Read on. Chapter 12. When you lose all hope, breathe. Sometimes something happens and you will find yourself having lost all hope. You will feel like giving up at times. You will feel so awful and miserable and overwhelmed. You will feel like things will never get better. You will want to run away. You will want to quit. Your heart will race like a car with no brakes, careening down the hill. Your mind will scatter like sheet lightning across the sky in a never-ending rumble of thunder and flashing anger, fear, and panic. Your breathing will often get real short and fast, and you'll feel like you just can't get enough air, like you're going to drown. You'll want to cry your eyes out in despair or scream in rage at the sky and not know whether to do one or the other, so you'll go back and forth between the two quickly. You will feel like no one will miss you, like you are a burden to the world, like you are worth more dead than alive. You will feel like it's all everyone else's fault, or like it is all someone else's fault. Maybe you'll think it's God's fault, or your spouse's, or your boss's, or your parents, friends, or neighbors. Maybe it will be your church leaders or teachers. Maybe it will all be the fault of the stranger or confidant you trusted who abused you or misused you when you came to them for help, or the twisted person who took from you what wasn't theirs. Or you'll settle onto the idea that it is all your own fault, and that will make you feel worst of all. When you feel all of these things and more, pay attention. When you feel like you are losing control and it is all hopeless, that's when you need to perk your ears up and realize what's going on. Step outside yourself for just a split second and look at what is happening to your mind and your body in those moments. Realize that those reactions you are having are not you. They are the instincts and physical reflexes and the screwed up biological drives gone haywire. An inner reptilian brain gone nuts. You have been dealt some kind of trauma and your outer brain no longer has control. The inner brain has lit up like a firecracker and it won't stop until it runs out of gunpowder. Find a safe place and let it run its course. Let it burn out. Don't make any lasting decisions while it's going. Don't let yourself or anyone you love get caught in the crossfire. Run home to your spouse, or if you don't have one, to your parents if you need to. Find a quiet room and just let the steam blow itself out. In between volleys of bullets of out-of-control emotions, run for shelter until you can take control again. And how do you take control of your body when you've lost it? Breathe. Just breathe. If you can control your breathing, you can control your world. If you can't control your breathing, focus and concentrate and keep trying until your breathing is your own again. This is the breath of life. Air. Oxygen. Without it, you'll lose complete control over your body in about 5 or 6 minutes. When it starts racing, when you're in a panic, slow it down. You may have lost control over your instinctive primitive brain, like a wild monkey. You may have lost control of your heart, which is thumping away like a time bomb. But your breathing? You've still got control over those muscles that lift and raise your rib cage. You can take back control over your diaphragm, that sheet of muscle between your lungs and your stomach. If you can control your breathing, you can learn to control anything else. Slow your lungs down and you'll slow your heart down. Slow your heart and you'll be able to slow your mind. Then, once you have control over your mind, you can control the rest of your body. And from there on, you can learn to gain control over the world around you a little bit at a time. It all starts with learning to breathe and control your breathing. So many of the martial arts concentrate on breathing. Yoga is centralized on breathing. Much of meditation is focused on learning to control your breathing and simply manage it for as long as possible. Learning to count to 10 before you lose your temper is an attempt at getting you to take a breath before you act. Freedivers who manage to dive hundreds of feet deep on a single breath of air for 5 minutes at a time have to learn to overcome those panic-inducing urges that make their chest contort in an attempt to suck air. Instead, they have used those urges like a timer to keep track of how long they've been down. My kids have learned that when they're feeling car sick, they need to open the windows, get the vents blowing fresh air in their faces, and think about breathing. Anyone who's ever tried to camp or sleep in a small enclosed space will know the headaches you get when you're breathing too much used air and the carbon dioxide starts to build up. Sleep apnea is a medical condition that often occurs when people hold their breath in their sleep. It's usually caused by a person's tongue and throat relaxing so much that it blocks their airway. They can weigh enough that it can actually overpower the normal automatic breathing reflex. Only when their heart begins racing, the carbon dioxide has built up, the oxygen is running low, that the brain stirs the person awake, just barely enough to take a breath. Spouses and partners will often hear the patient stop breathing for a minute at a time and then suddenly take a big gasp of air. Snoring and grinding of teeth go hand in hand with this quite a bit as well. This condition grows slowly over time. It's very heavily associated with sleeping on your back and being overweight, and causes a whole number of other problems. First is that you just aren't sleeping well. No one remembers waking up to take that breath, but it jerks them out of their deep REM sleep that's so necessary for a healthy mind and body. I've seen reports showing heart rates race up to 150 to 180 beats per minute while they're sleeping. That's like a super intense workout while you should be resting. Over the years, that stress and lack of rest leads to all sorts of health problems like diabetes, heart disease, strokes, autoimmune issues, mental health problems, etc. It's a slow killer. Breathing is important. I had a scout leader as a teenager who was a chiropractor and also a master of judo and jiu-jitsu. He was a fairly short, middle-aged Japanese guy. I remember him giving us a lesson in self-defense. Among the tips he gave us were to slow down your breathing when you are in a match. Then we watched as he took on 4 high school football players and wrestlers back to back without a pause before he even started to break a sweat, while they all crawled away from the mat totally defeated. Another time, as we hiked Half Dome in Yosemite National Park, he caught up to me, saw me struggling just to keep one foot in front of the other as we neared the summit and its terrifying cables. Focus on your breathing. If you need to, breathe out for as long as possible, then suck in as much air as you can as fast as you can. Do that for as long as you can think of it. Then he marched on by, practically whistling a cheery song as if it were a stroll in the park. If you ever fall through the ice into the cold water below, every survival expert will tell you the first thing to do is slow your breathing. Don't let panic take you. If you ever look up the Wim Hof method, his ideas are focused on this thing. Slow your breath down, don't panic. I'm tempted to go into all the science of how this works and why it's so incredibly amazing, but my wife thinks I should spare you the details, and she's probably right. I will say this. Your body is terrible at measuring how much oxygen is in your system at any time. There's not really a warning system for low oxygen. You just black out before you know what's happened. Remember the story I told about Destin Sandlin and the NASA chamber? Because he was able to think he was breathing and let go of the CO2 in his system, the carbon dioxide, his body didn't give him any warning signs that anything was wrong. Your body is really good at measuring how much carbon dioxide and used air is building up in your blood. You can actually survive quite a bit of CO2, but your body starts screaming at you at the slightest buildup. You have about 3 to 5 minutes of oxygen in your body at most times, but it only takes a single minute's worth of CO2 to make most people panic. Still, don't practice this underwater without a buddy system. What's the lesson? Your body will very easily panic when it doesn't need to. Your outer brain, the part that just learned what it did about oxygen, can be much stronger than your primitive brain if you practice controlling it. You can survive much more than you think you can, I promise. Almost nothing is as bad as your panic will make you think it is. Your body is tuned to look for problems, but not things that are going well. That takes practice. Gratitude is not a natural instinct for most people. So when life gets out of hand, when you've been dealt a blow you just can't handle, when you feel like you will never recover, when you feel like nothing makes sense, when you feel like you are going to be miserable forever, don't believe it. Just don't. You've got more air in you than you think. When you've lost all hope for the future, rely on the habits you formed when your mind was clear. Keep the promises and agreements you made to others, even if you don't feel like it. At least as many of them as you can muster, or even just the few essential ones. Let autopilot keep you going while you need it. Go ahead and be a zombie or emotionless robot for a while. It is okay. You've got a lot going on and you don't know how to process it all. Step back and focus on the basics. Let your past momentum keep you moving forward. Most times, it will carry you right on through the storm, like a mountain biker splashing through a rocky river or stream. Sometimes you just need to hang on tight and just plow through. If you crash, you crash. Hope that you don't, but deal with that if it happens. Let momentum carry you as far as it can. When you catch yourself losing control, breathe. It is the one thing you can always fight to take back control of. And stay as consciously in charge of your breathing for as long as you can. Your body will fight to let the automatic systems take control over it, but don't let them. Stay as focused on the air going in and out of your lungs for as long as you can and slow it down. Then, when you've got your breathing under control, work on the other things. So, like Anna Nalek sings, just breathe. Chapter 13. Desire, Hope, and Hacking Biology. The first step to change is just wanting to change, wanting to be better, wanting to get better, thinking that something can change. If you don't have this desire or this hope, nothing will happen. The phrase, faith as a mustard seed, is very appropriate. Just like a seed falling into fertile soil grows into a large bush or tree, a simple desire, want, or hope is all that is needed to start lasting change. What if you don't have a desire to change? Lots of things can give us a desire to want to change. Personal motivation, social motivation, or the environment around us can motivate us to change. Yet we get to choose what will motivate us or not. Sometimes we just need to get out of the way and let the other things in our life spark the change in us. What if you want to change but don't have any hope that it's possible? I hope that reading the first half of the book showed you that change is always possible. Often it's just a matter of figuring out our biology and hacking it. If you're still not convinced, there are other ways to receive that hope. Find someone who has gone through the change you want to apply to yourself and set up a time with them when they can be completely honest and let them tell you their story of how they changed. Find a support group filled with others who've gone through that change, or led by a facilitator who has undergone that change. How about a church or a religious setting with others who felt the change in their life for the better? But why would we want to change? Why go through all the trouble? It's tough work, so tough that so far only humans have been able to accomplish it, and even just barely on individual levels. Why change our life, our lifestyle, or our environment just to become someone else? That will be among the most difficult decisions of your life you will ever make. Summary: be decisive. Chapter 14. Happiness, Gratitude, and Whitewater Rivers. What makes us happy? What is happiness made of? Where does happiness come from? There is a large collection of TED Talks you can find online, full of scientists who can tell you what leads to happiness and how to get more of it in your life. And they'll agree with many of the pastors, priests, monks, and rabbis you've come across too. First off, life makes no guarantees. The world doesn't actually owe us anything. Just because we are raised in a certain place, surrounded by others who get to achieve certain life goals, does not mean we will get to achieve the same things. Long life is not guaranteed. Health is not guaranteed. Wealth, family, relationships are not guaranteed. The American dream, raising your social status, owning a home, retirement, are not guaranteed. We get these things either through hard work or as gifts from others. Even then, bad timing, immaturity, poor decisions, the actions of others, or nature can rob us of any of it. Crying "foul" and giving up is the natural reaction. We think it's unfair, and maybe it is. The problem with the world is not that things are unfair. It's that the world is much more fair than any of us want to admit. Stuff happens, to all of us, at different times and in different ways. Comparing ourselves to others and their privileges, blessings, or comforts is cancerous and destructive. It's nice to have goals to aim for, and we should have goals to aim for. But we are in a race only with ourselves and should only compare ourselves to ourselves. This is much, much easier said than done, and it is crucial for happiness and fulfillment. Much of our depression, anxiety, and worry comes from thinking that our life should be better than it is. We feel sadness and anger, and we think we shouldn't feel those things. We have trouble sleeping, and we worry that something is wrong with us. We experience loneliness and fear that there's something deeply wrong with us. We struggle with poverty and worry that we will have to scrape by our whole life. We become afraid that it will never get better. We lose hope. We give up trying. We can't figure out how to fix what is wrong with us, so we quit, or we stop caring. Happiness begins with a decision. First, you decide to become happier. Why you'll make that decision is hard to pin down. It'll be different for each person. Once you've decided to have more happiness, you'll next need to know what to do. Happiness requires action. It does seem to come naturally to some people and is more difficult for others. What we find when we look at their lives closely is that usually those people who are naturally happy have been taught good happiness-inducing habits since they were born and were raised in a home with good happiness-inducing habits and lifestyles. Others have to work hard to become happy and develop these habits. The greatest privilege someone can be born with is this trait. Some are born into it and others not. A safe and stable home where happiness, and the behaviors that lead to it, is taught is a tremendous privilege to be born into. Poverty is nothing to celebrate, but extreme wealth does little to make us happy either. Many lottery winners have been followed up on, and it's discovered that very few winners of large lotteries would rate themselves as any happier after their windfall than before. Several studies have been done on what the happiest income is, and with the varying amounts that studies come up with, the happiest incomes are usually just a little bit above the average for the area. In other words, we are happiest when we have just a bit more than our neighbors and peers. When our bills are paid and we have a little bit extra. The natural tendency is to add more bills to our life and raise our lifestyle to a new level. Then we have to compare ourselves to a new set of peers that we want to be like and be just a bit better than. Very few of us can resist the temptation to out-earn our ability to spend. We are perpetually stuck in the need and desire for more. It's in our nature. It's a drive inherent in many of us. That drive can sometimes get shut down when we fail to move forward after years and years of frustratingly slow progress. When we feel stuck, we eventually give up and settle. The drive for more and for ambition is a good thing to a degree. We can maintain our ambition while being grateful. It is those two things combined that help us find the greatest happiness. One without the other causes despair and frustration. For me, this book was an attempt to do something with the abundance of free time I had and still have between patients. I had to do something with my free time besides watching YouTube and endlessly browsing Facebook or my Google newsfeed. As I record this audiobook, I've got a lot of free time on my hands because of the COVID-19 quarantine and lockdown. If I can't help others by fixing their health, I would share what I've learned through all the experience I've had and knowledge I've gained in the process. Not long ago, I watched an interview of Elon Musk, who made a fortune on PayPal, who founded SpaceX and Tesla and other companies. He was asked, "How would you respond to those who want to be you?" He replied, essentially, "I don't know that anyone should want to be me. I don't think being me is as great as they think." In another interview, he described starting his companies as eating glass. Of course, he has a comfortable life, but it's far from stress-free. Mo money, mo problems. We trade the problems of poverty for the problems of wealth. Some of us would rather have the problems of poverty, others would be terrified at the thought. They lose sleep and begin sweating just at the mentioning of it. Now, when I say happy in this chapter, I don't mean the short-lived kind of happiness you get when you happen to be eating delicious food, enjoying some romantic company, or getting a buzz off some substance or thrill. You know, that dopamine, oxytocin, glutamate, adrenaline rush of hormones. Those things feel great, but their effects are very temporary and short-lived. Happiness is never permanent, but you can actually change the shape of your brain to be happier for longer and with less effort. A temporary rush of dopamine, glutamate, or oxytocin certainly feels good, but until you've built your life in such a way to keep those things flowing in a steady stream, they dry up real fast. Ultimately, our long-term happiness comes from an absence of constant stress, fear, and a steady flow of those hormones that boost our growth and progress. Too often, we create an illusion of happiness when we keep giving ourselves a large shot of stimulation-based happiness. We want a stream of these feel-good hormones flowing through our mind, so we do what our brain needs to get that rush. Maybe it's a 6-pack of beer every night, or daily masturbation. Perhaps it's 3 hours of TV every evening before bed. These rushes are short-lived, become a daily dependence, and grow to be slightly harder to achieve over time, even if just a tiny, tiny bit. The first high that someone gets from taking cocaine will often be their strongest because they are most sensitive to it. The brain sees this dump of dopamine and adrenaline and starts desensitizing those nerves because nothing should feel that good and actually be good for us. So forever after, many addicts will keep trying to pursue those early highs and never able to achieve them. Or they'll need more and more drugs to get it. Or sweeter and more sugary foods. Or edgier and edgier TV and movies. Or bigger and more dangerous risks. Think of a river with a lake further up the valley. We love the rush of water and the abundant life it can bring to a farm when we flood the river with a bit of extra water. We get a nice abundant crop, a bit of excitement playing in the whitewater rapids, and it's just pretty to look at, isn't it? But to get that extra rush of water without rain or a storm, we have to open the floodgates, or lower the level of the dam, or carve a deeper canyon at the exit of the lake. If we keep that kind of behavior up, we end up draining our lake. We run dry. To get that kind of water flow now, we have to wait for the lake to fill up. And while it's empty, we have no reserve to get us through a hard time. We have no backup, no savings. If a drought hits us now, we are in serious trouble. And to get the lake to fill back up, we'll likely have to rebuild the dam or canyon wall or raise the floodgates and live off of less water while we build that reserve again. In life, it's the same. We need a sustainable plan that can keep life as steady as possible. The world will throw enough curveballs and unexpected surprises at us without us making it worse. John Wayne is known for saying, "Life's hard. It's even harder if you're stupid." Apparently John Wayne didn't really say that, but it sounds like something he would say. It really comes from George Higgins' book, The Friends of Eddie Coyle. If we spend too much of our energy on pursuing excitement or trying to fill those empty holes in our life, we can drain ourselves of emotional reserves. We can suck our relationships dry, often ruining them. Then, when we completely run out of our emotional, hormonal, and social resources, we have to slug through the hard time rebuilding, restoring, and renewing them. And it's much harder to get through that process than to just never start it. Learning this fact of life is something that each person will have to learn in their own way, and we will all go through that learning process at least once at some point in our life. Sustainable happiness is achievable, at least for periods of time, when our environment around us is stable, and even many times when it's not stable. We can learn to be happy even when everything around us just plain sucks. And if we've learned to achieve that sustainability, we can rebuild our life much faster and easier when our environment around us, such as our relationships, our jobs, our health, the weather, etc., does fall apart, because it probably will at some point. The first thing about happiness that just about every expert in the field agrees on is to be grateful, be thankful, be optimistic. These are all the same. Look around you and see what you have. Start with that, no matter how little it actually is. Work with what you've got. Whether you're homeless, hiding from a storm under a bridge in Kansas, or a billionaire in Dubai, if you want to find happiness, start with what you have. Be thankful for the bridge. Be thankful for the 10 Lamborghinis in your garage. Be thankful for the clothes you have, the food you are getting to eat, the heart beating in your chest. Be thankful for the air you are getting to breathe, even if it is polluted. Be happy that you're not suffocating. As I've visited support groups, as I've met with experts and listened to lectures on this topic, as I've attended worship services of my own and other faiths, as I've studied history, I've learned it can always be worse. Always. Be happy with what you have, and just because you seem to have it all, don't assume that you actually do. Be grateful for your family and friends. If you don't have any friends, be grateful for those people who serve you at the grocery store and smile at you. Be grateful that most of the people around you are obeying traffic laws and driving in their lanes and not running into you. Be grateful for challenges that teach you what you don't already know well enough. Be grateful for those purposes and drives that are fueling your need to get up in the morning. Be grateful for your failures. Recognize them as the only way to get better. They are the stepping stones to success. Be grateful you recognize them as failures. The truly unfortunate people in this world are those who don't know that they are messing up. Self-awareness is huge. Be grateful for it. There are those reading this who will be scowling right now or laughing their heads off, thinking that being grateful for such pitiful things is just self-delusion. We do need to be careful that when we are counseling a friend or a family member deep in the pits of despair, we don't try to force that gratitude onto them. At least you have a family, or be grateful you've at least got your health. Those admonitions, well-intentioned as they are, often come across as calloused or unsympathetic. Often, we do need to acknowledge and validate others' feelings before they'll feel safe enough to address them themselves. I can't and won't try to tell everyone what they should be grateful for in each circumstance. It's not my place. And I just don't know what each person is dealing with. What's important is you using your own mind to find things that are keeping you alive and learning and being appreciative of them. Shawn Achor is a successful business consultant, Harvard graduate, and expert on happiness and positive psychology. Dan Gilbert is a renowned author, professor of psychology at Harvard, and an expert on happiness. Robert Waldinger is a psychiatrist and professor at Harvard's Medical School and an expert on happiness. All three of them would agree that such gratitude-based self-delusion is not a delusion at all. Happiness, whether it comes from the joy one finds on eating a delicious can of Chef Boyardee, or walking around the block on a cold moonlit evening, or eating dinner with friends, or receiving a smile from your spouse or loved one are all genuine forms of happiness. There's no self-delusion in regards to happiness, and they'll all agree that gratitude is at the root of all happiness. Made-up happiness still gets translated in the brain as real happiness. If you can find something to be happy about, you will be happy about it. So, unless there's something in the water at Harvard messing with the smart people there, it should be easy to believe them when all three of these experts will tell you to start by being thankful. Let's add to their findings with the recommendation in Stephen Covey's The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People to quit complaining and take charge of your situation, whatever it is. Use what you already have, or show appreciation or gratitude for what you've got. Then go use it to the best of your ability. This is a hard logic to refute. Enjoy what you have. Work with what you have. Use what you have, no matter how little or how much of it you have. This is the start of happiness, and it's the start of change and success. A popular habit of happy people and those who will teach us how to be happy is to make lists of what we are thankful for. Do it on a daily basis. Whether it's a prayer to a God, thanking Him for your home and food, thanking the people you meet for all the good you encountered during the day, a simple list in a diary, or a quiet meditative moment before bed or right after waking up. Reviewing and reflecting on the good things that happened during a day set the hormones in your brain going in a good direction. For the next several hours or even the next couple of days, your brain will work better. You'll think more clearly, more constructively, more gratefully, and more optimistically. You'll find answers to problems you have been unable to solve. You'll talk to people in more civil ways that'll be more persuasive and constructive. You'll find more success in your efforts. Sean Achor and his colleagues will tell you that most of the time, happiness makes you successful, not the other way around, as most of this world believes. Most of our society is set up to think that success leads to happiness. It's not. Being happy leads to more success. Maybe not immediately or as much as you'd like, but it starts, just like a tiny seed, soaking up moisture in the ground, getting ready to sprout. The moral of this chapter is, be grateful. Chapter 15. Get comfortable getting dirty, but try to stay clean. As I've worked with recovering addicts and visited support groups, I've seen those who are optimistic about their recovery, who don't beat themselves up for slip-ups. Those who look at each new day as a challenge to overcome are those who make the greatest progress. That's not to say they don't recognize their failures, but they look at those failures with what's called by most scientists, teachers, and experts as a growth mindset. They look at each failure as a stepping stone, something to learn from, an experience to be grateful for. In this way, they and their brain look for solutions rather than collapsing under the despair, discouragement, or anger of another mess-up. A growth mindset is the belief that you can change, that you can become better, that your brain and your mind can grow. It's real whether you believe it or not. Students who believe in a growth mindset do better on tests, perform better in classes, and suffer less stress and anxiety over the topics and subjects they struggle with. Adults and kids who believe in a growth mindset are able to learn new skills faster, form new habits easier, and tackle challenges with more success. Along with having a growth mindset, the idea that you can change, that you can get better, comes the idea of practicing and learning. Old dogs can still learn new tricks. If you're still breathing, your mind can change. When you're a kid, a child, or even a teenager, just about everything is new, and learning is just a part of being awake. When you've become established in a career, a lifestyle, and family for a few decades, life becomes routine and not much changes. Learning becomes uncomfortable, change becomes harder. We just aren't used to it. That's all fixable, though. It's not that our brain can't learn anything new, it's that we forget what it's like to have to learn new things. Learning is hard. Practicing is tough. Failing and messing up and trying again is frustrating and painful, mentally and emotionally, not just physically. Just accept that and move on with whatever you're trying to accomplish. Maybe it is harder for an adult to learn a new language, but it's still very possible and happens all the time. Try to remember how hard it was to learn as a kid when every experience was new. My kids took a few years to get a basic grasp on English, even when speaking it every day. Most adults can pick up a new language in about a year in the same circumstances. Read and learn. Don't ever assume you know enough. Don't ever think that instinct or nature or biology will teach you what you need to know by yourself. Through practicing and mistakes, you may learn much of what you need to know, but you don't need to learn it all from scratch yourself. Take advantage of others' struggles and learn from them. Most of us have heard that a wise man learns from his mistakes. A few of us have heard the additional, an even wiser man learns from the mistakes of others. Having this growth mindset requires an open-minded, progressive mentality. Don't hang on to everything you were taught before. You need to be able to look at new things, new ideas. You need to consider that there's still a lot more to learn and that others out there have figured out what you haven't. This doesn't mean abandoning what has worked for you your whole life, but accepting the idea that not everything has worked for you your whole life, and you need to do something about it. It requires an open mind to possibilities, to new ways of thinking and living, at least in part. I'm not saying ditch your home in the country and go live in the city near the universities and look to them for all the answers. Nor am I saying ditch your career, home, and family to go discover yourself wandering the world alone for 5 years. I'm saying read books, look to experts, take classes, focus on one problem or thing at a time, and figure out how to do it better. If you can't solve a particular problem, put it on hold. Don't abandon it, just set it aside and expect that you'll get an answer for it someday. While you wait, focus on other problems and solutions. Go out and get some answers. Now, use all the answers you find with a grain of salt. There are lots of people who will give you answers freely, lots more who will love to charge you an arm and a leg for their answers. There are those who will tell you exactly what you want to hear, and those who will love to catch your attention by spewing out the exact opposite of what you've ever been told. And some people will tell you what you already know, but rephrased in a way that sounds wrong. Not all these answers will be right. In fact, most of them will be wrong. It will take practice, experimenting, and even failing along the way. Over time, you will become your own best judge of what is right and wrong. Michael Pollan, in his book Second Nature, gives a great description of what makes for a green thumb, or a person who is very good at growing plants. Even if you don't like gardening and have no interest in it, you'll find yourself laughing and thinking deeply as you read through his entertaining stories about it. He says it takes a great deal of practice and failure to become a green thumb. My experience with failing to grow my own plants would agree. His opinion is that an expert in gardening is someone who doesn't get discouraged about failure, but sees it as a chance to learn something new about their garden, their weather, their soil, their environment, their habits, whatever it is. After enough accumulated failures, green thumbs develop an instinct for what works and what doesn't. This intuition ends up making gardening look easy to those on the outside or to the noobs who are still figuring it out. The famous quote from Teddy Roosevelt, known as "the man in the arena," has been an inspiration to millions of people. It's used by the military and public and private corporations alike to instill the drive to go out and do, to go and try. It is not the critic who counts, not the man who points out how the strong man stumbles, or where the doer of deeds could have done them better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, whose face is marred by dust and sweat and blood, who strives valiantly, who errs, who comes short again and again, because there is no effort without error and shortcoming, but who actually does strive to do the deeds, who knows great enthusiasms, the great devotions, who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be with those cold and timid souls who neither know victory nor defeat. Leo Tolstoy, the famous Russian author, wrote, "It is true that I have not fulfilled 1,000th part of them, the precepts I profess, and I am ashamed of this. But I have failed to fulfill them not because I did not wish to, but because I was unable to. Teach me how to escape from the net of temptations that surrounds me. Help me, and I will fulfill them. Even without help, I wish and hope to fulfill them. Attack me, I do this myself. But attack me rather than the path I follow, and which I point out to anyone who asks me where I think it lies. If I know the way home and am walking along it drunkenly, is it any less the right way because I am staggering from side to side?" Failing and trying again is the key to success, and failing while learning from others is the key to the greatest success. There's a saying that goes, "A master has failed more times than the apprentice has even attempted." I'm going to repeat that later in the book. This idea has been spread by philosophers since ancient times. Confucius said, "Better a diamond with a flaw than a pebble without." Shakespeare said in his play King Lear, "Striving to better, oft we mar what is well." Voltaire, the French author, repeated it famously as, "The best is the enemy of good." This idea is closely related to the nirvana fallacy, where we attack something as all bad because it is imperfect. We do this to our political leaders. We do this to our religious leaders and churches. We do this to our parents. It is a black and white way of thinking with no room for shades of gray and color in between. We cannot find perfection in this life. We will aim for perfection and find things that are good, and even things that are better and best. And one person's best may be better or worse than another's. That's just how it's going to be sometimes. Perfection as an ideal is a wonderful thing. No one likes making mistakes, they hurt and are painful. However, if we don't act, hoping to achieve perfection first, we'll never act. Some people call it paralysis by analysis. We overthink a problem and never tackle it. More often, good that is done is better than a perfection that can't be achieved. Some leaders in the armed forces of the American military call it the 70% rule. Basically, it states, if you feel 70% certain about it, do it. Most of the time, you'll be right. The reality of life is that we very often can't see the entire pathway to perfection. We can't even see more than a few steps. So we walk those few steps, encounter a bend in the path or an obstacle, and then we make a plan to overcome it. It may take some time and slow down our progress. The goal is to keep making progress through our mistakes. We cannot grow without messing up. A child cannot learn to walk without falling down. If you're going to fall, fall quickly and learn from it. For a long time, I tried to avoid failure in my life by researching and learning and analyzing the mistakes of others, trying to avoid failure at all costs in order to be the wiser man. In reality, two things happened. One, I either didn't recognize the failures I was already making, or two, I didn't grow and progress for fear of failing. I was my own limit. I was my own curse. I had damned myself like a dam stops water. In a sense, the religious use of the word dam is the same. Your progress is halted. Your road to perfection is hampered. When you sin or transgress the laws of God or nature or evolution, you are stopping yourself and those around you from moving forward. Using both our own mistakes and the mistakes of others will make us wisest of all. Personal effort and learning from others makes for the greatest chance of success and happiness. It allows us to do the impossible, or at least what has never been done before. By the 1940s, a handful of athletes were determined to run a mile in under 4 minutes. Roger Bannister, a medical student, was one of those. For years, he and others across Europe and America were trying to beat that record. There were many who thought it couldn't be done. Roger Bannister was the first to beat that limit in 1954, only after spending a significant chunk of his life and free time working at it. He only held that record for 46 days before others were beating it. Many great athletes now beat that 4-minute barrier regularly. As of now, even at least 8 high school students have beat that record, and 2 men over the age of 40 have beat it. Currently, the world record for the mile run is 3 minutes 43.13 seconds. Often, we don't think something can be done until we see someone else do it. Once it's out that something is possible, others will follow. After you finish this book, go read about longevity and centenarians and the feats that many of them accomplish. It's amazing. Anyone who competes in running can tell you stories of men who didn't begin running until they are 80 and then go on to complete marathons. Or see how many 90-year-olds go back to college and earn bachelor's degrees. There are scores of folks who retire from a full career and start new ones from scratch. As I learn what the very elderly can accomplish, it makes me determined to be one of them. I understand that physical and mental limitations are very real for some. Some of us just never will be able to accomplish certain things, that is true. But, that's another big but, we don't know what we can or can't accomplish if we quit trying, or never even bother to start in the first place. If we want to be the first to do something, expect it to be nearly impossible, because if it were easy or doable, other people would already be doing it. Everyone thinks it's impossible because no one else has figured out how to do it yet. A friend and colleague of mine showed me a trick to practice doing oral surgery around sinuses, since we have to do that once in a while as dentists. He would practice using raw eggs by removing the shell of the egg from the inner membrane without tearing it or ripping it. He posed a challenge to me to remove the entire shell from the egg. He didn't think it could be done and told me of the troubles he ran into as he tried. Searching online couldn't produce any results of others getting further than he had. Even a news article of a neurosurgeon from China who practiced his hand skills by doing this only showed him removing a small portion of the shell. I learned from my friend's troubles, came up with a solution, and after 9 tries, I was able to remove the entire shell, a tiny bit at a time. I even got it on video and put it up on YouTube to brag about it to my friends and family. I was proud. Can you blame me? Arthur Borman is a former military paratrooper injured from his military service. He became severely handicapped and was told by doctors that he would never walk again without the help of someone or something else holding him upright. For many years, he lived with that reality, relying on crutches and leg braces to get around. He had accepted it as fact for many years that he was handicapped, crippled, stuck. until something in him decided he would find some way to get better. He found a brave yoga teacher with a unique program, including a strict diet and careful yoga sessions. Arthur slowly learned to stand and balance on his own, without the help of crutches. Then he learned to walk. Eventually, he learned to run again, without the help of crutches, braces, or aids. He gained a whole new life because of his own determination and the help of other brave people. The lesson is that we shouldn't give up. The greatest limitation in our life is the limitation we put on ourselves. I always did like the song The Curse by Michael McLean with the lyrics, "There is no curse or evil spell that's worse than one we give ourselves." When we struggle to overcome some sin or weakness or addiction in life, we can take two approaches. One, believe that one day we can become better from it, that God, a higher power, or the world around us will one day help us overcome it. We can believe that struggling with such a challenge is just a normal part of life and actually improves other aspects of our life. Even if we don't win in this area, we often learn empathy and kindness to others in the process, and thus improve one of the most useful skills of life, building relationships. The second approach to dealing with our weakness is 2. After spending years or decades fighting against something we have little to no control over, we quit, give up, and just begin openly indulging in whatever we feel like, since it doesn't make any difference anyways. If I'm gonna keep failing, I might as well jump all in and enjoy it. That's a fast way to lose everything you love within a short period of time, or get yourself really stuck in a bad habit. Even trying to decide between those two choices is a normal struggle. Some days we will want to just quit and give up. Some days nothing will stand in our way. That's normal. Having a growth mindset, the deep belief that people can change, that we can get better, become happier, and improve ourselves, is crucial to finding happiness and riding out those low spots when we feel like quitting. This idea that things can get better is deeply rooted in our idea of love. When we find things to be grateful for, we appreciate them, we sacrifice for them, and pay prices for them. We begin to love these things. We begin to give true value to them, not just financial or economic value, but emotional value. That value that the MasterCard commercials tells you is priceless. When we realize that we can change, we begin to love ourselves, not in a narcissistic way, but in the way that you love a baby child. We see ourselves with potential, the way our loved ones see us. When we love ourselves, we begin to love others. We slow down our criticisms and judgments of others, understanding that they are just like we are, weak, flawed, still learning, still growing. We learn that many of our personality traits we think are natural aren't set in stone, and that this applies to others. We become just as hopeful for others' growth as for our own, and we begin to trust in them to work on themselves as we work on ourselves. Practicing gratitude and a growth mindset takes time and practice. It will not come easy all the time, and it will not be quick or without major setbacks at times. Like Jim Collins reports in his book, Good to Great, on his research of companies who excelled while others in their field with all the same advantages failed, success and improvement is like turning a great big flywheel. You have to generate momentum a little bit at a time, but a small force, applied consistently and regularly, creates momentum. One day, those around you, including yourself, will look and see what you have accomplished and say, "Wow, how'd you do that?" When they do, tell them magic. Just kidding, tell them the truth. The take-home message of this chapter: take the first step.